What if I told you that one small island, with no oil, no gold, no farmland, and no river, managed to become one of the richest and most efficient countries on Earth? Singapore did not have natural resources. It had rules.
And get the people of Singapore, help me teach you a lesson you won't forget. And I'm prepared to start all over again. Or stop it. Get back to work, restore discipline, then argue your case.
Now imagine this question being asked across Africa. Which country could become the Singapore of Africa? Is it Kenya? Loud, ambitious, chaotic, and innovative. Rwanda? Disciplined, efficient, tightly controlled? Or Botswana? Quiet, stable, and patient. This is not a story about who is winning. It's a story about three different African paths toward development and what the idea of the Singapore of Africa really means. When people say the Singapore of Africa, they usually mean more than wealth. They mean a country with strong institutions, low corruption, efficient public services, clean cities, strategic long-term planning, and a government that actually works. Singapore rose from a poor colonial port in the 1960s to a global financial and logistics hub in just a few decades. Not through democracy first, not through natural resources, but through discipline, meritocracy, and ruthless efficiency.
The question is to get more. And each generation, each election, you must find 10, 15, 20 good candidates, and amongst them, 2, 3 potential good ministers. You need a population that understands that. Then it will work.
It invested heavily in education, infrastructure, housing, trade, and an uncompromising anti-corruption system. But Singapore also had a small population, a strategic global location, a highly centralized government, and the freedom to make hard, sometimes unpopular decisions. So the real question is not which African country is Singapore, or can be Singapore. The question is, which African country is trying to apply some of those lessons, and how far can they realistically go? Let's begin with Kenya's case: ambition, scale, and chaos. Kenya is often the loudest candidate in this conversation. It has one of Africa's largest and most diverse economies, a population of over 50 million, a powerful regional role in East Africa, and Nairobi, one of the continent's most important cities. Nairobi is sometimes called Silicon Savannah. It is home to tech startups, fintech innovation, global NGOs, and multinational headquarters. Kenya gave the world M-Pesa, which revolutionized mobile banking, a strong entrepreneurial culture, a relatively free press, and a vibrant civil society. In many ways, Kenya represents Africa's democratic, market-driven development model.
I think they made many correct decisions, which as Kenyans we can benefit from learning.
But ambition comes with problems. Kenya struggles with persistent corruption, political polarization, inequality, and uneven development. Mega infrastructure projects like the Standard Gauge Railway, the Nairobi Expressway, ports and roads have transformed parts of the country but also raised concerns about debt, transparency, and long-term returns.
I now see individuals across the country congregating, and you call them opposition. These were individuals who were in the Moi government. They were in the Kibaki government. They were in the Uhuru government. What is new about them? Nothing except their insatiable greed for power and the privileges that power offers.
Kenya's strength is its energy and scale. Its weakness is coordination. Singapore is often described as a well-drilled orchestra. Kenya sometimes feels more like a jazz band, creative, powerful, but occasionally improvising a bit too much. And yes, jazz can be beautiful, but it's not always efficient. Now, Rwanda's case: efficiency and control. If Kenya is loud, Rwanda is quiet and deliberate. Rwanda has built a reputation as one of Africa's most efficient states with clean streets, fast bureaucracy, efficient digital public services, and clear national planning. In Kigali, things work. Permits are processed quickly with no corruption. infrastructure projects are completed on time, and policies are executed with discipline. Rwanda has invested heavily in healthcare, most famously through its medical drone delivery system, which transports blood, vaccines, and life-saving supplies to remote hospitals in minutes rather than hours. In a country where terrain once slowed emergency care, drones now connect rural clinics to national medical centers with remarkable efficiency.
Zipline provides allows any doctor or nurse anywhere in the country to basically send a text message and get the product that they need 15 to 30 minutes later.
This innovation reflects a broader strategy of combining healthcare reform with investments in education, gender equality, technology, and data-driven governance, all aimed at building a fast, responsive state. Rwanda consistently ranks high in ease of doing business, government efficiency, and anti-corruption measures.
A better model is one that presents broadband as an efficiently built and shared utility. This is the kind of model that we have adopted in my country, Rwanda.
In many ways, Rwanda feels the most Singapore-like on the surface. But there is another side. Rwanda's system is highly centralized, strongly controlled, and politically restrictive. Critics argue that political opposition is limited, media freedom is constrained, and economic success is sometimes overstated. Singapore, too, had tight political control in its early decades, but Rwanda's context is very different. It is landlocked, it has limited natural resources, and its development depends heavily on state direction rather than market spontaneity. Rwanda's strength is discipline, but its risk is over-centralization. Singapore succeeded with tight control, but it also relied heavily on global trade flows that Rwanda simply does not have. And now, Botswana's case. Stability and patience. Botswana rarely makes headlines, and that might be its greatest strength. Since independence in 1966, Botswana has avoided coups, maintained democratic continuity, built strong institutions, and managed its diamond wealth responsibly. Unlike many resource-rich countries, Botswana did not fall into the resource curse. It partnered strategically with diamond companies, and it invested in education, health, infrastructure, and sovereign reserves.
As a result, a total of 1,211 remote area youth have been enrolled in tertiary institutions, while 360 formal employment jobs were offered over the past year. Housing. Madam Speaker, as part of the government's effort to provide shelter for the needy, government has begun construction of 451 destitute houses during the financial year 2012-13. For this financial year, we have further approved construction of 404 houses at a cost of 45 million pula.
Botswana consistently ranks among Africa's least corrupt countries. Its civil service is professional, its judiciary is respected, and its policies are predictable. All this is due to the incredible work of the former President Seretse Khama. If Singapore is famous for efficiency, Botswana is famous for institutional trust. But Botswana also faces limits. Its economy remains heavily dependent on diamonds, slow to diversify, small in population and market size. Botswana does not move fast, it moves carefully. Singapore sprinted. Botswana walks steadily, cautiously, and deliberately. By now, you must have noticed that each country excels in a different part of the Singapore equation, but none of them checks all the boxes. Here is the uncomfortable reality. Singapore cannot be copied. Not fully. And here is why. Singapore had a population under 6 million, one dominant city, a strategic maritime location, and Cold War geopolitics that favored its rise. African countries face much larger populations, ethnic and regional diversity, colonial borders, and global economic inequalities. Trying to copy-paste Singapore ignores context. A country's development is not like a software. You cannot just install it. Kenya cannot shrink its population, Rwanda cannot change geography, and Botswana cannot magically diversify overnight. And perhaps more importantly, Singapore itself is changing. The model that worked in the 1970s may not work the same way in the 2020s. So here's the deeper question. Should African countries try to become the Singapore of Africa? Or should they build African models for African realities? Maybe Kenya's messy democracy is not a weakness, but a foundation for long-term resilience. Maybe Rwanda's efficiency is valuable, but only if it evolves with greater openness. Maybe Botswana's patience is underrated, and stability itself is a competitive advantage. Singapore is not a destination. It is a reference point. Africa does not need a Singapore. It needs many successful context-specific models.